So let me ask you a question. By a show of hands, how many of you already know what you'll be having for dinner tonight? All right, about half the room. How many of you already know that you will be having dinner tonight? All right, so that's pretty much everybody. Now that may seem like a little bit of a silly question, but I want you to actually think about the significance of that. Because chances are there are very few people in this room, if any, that have ever had to wonder about that question. Where is my next meal coming from? And the fact that we don't have to worry about that allows us to do a lot of things that much more productively. Because if you had to be concerned about that question, you probably couldn't do that day job quite as well. All of a sudden, a lot of the intricacies and details you put into your work do not become as important. Now, I want you to contrast that, though, to our ancestors. Go back about 10,000 years. Everybody's still in a hunter-gatherer society. And in those societies, though, every day when you woke up, you would spend 70 to 90% of every waking moment just trying to find that next meal. You had to go out, kill an antelope, gather up some nuts and berries, whatever it was, you had to do it that day. And if the herds got up and moved on, then that meant so did you and your tribe or your group of people that you moved around with. And that was life. And that was survival day in and day out. Now, I see the looks on some of your faces, and some of you are saying, what does any of this have to do with business? It's a nice history lesson, but what's the connection? But the reality is, this is exactly the way a lot of us operate our businesses today. We operate them in survival mode. And the majority of small businesses, we all know the stats, fail within 5 years because they can't find enough customers. They're always wondering, where does that next customer come from? Where does my next paycheck come from? Imagine, though, if people did not have to do that, or if it was a very, very low item on the priority list. If you could focus the rest of your attention to places other than just finding that next customer, what could you do in your business? How could you make it grow? How could you improve it? This is the question I want to pose today. And the things that I have to share with you in this talk, cultivating customers, they're not really anything new. And in only about 20, 25 minutes, there's really nothing that I could tell you that's going to fundamentally change your business and you're going to walk away and be, oh my gosh, this was amazing. What I do hope to do, though, is just to give you an idea, just to give you a model for thinking about a lot of the things that we do in business and a lot of the things that we're faced with every day as small business owners. The reason I came up with this is that there are a few broken models out there. When we think about the things that are happening in small businesses, here we go. People are out there hunting just to survive. Whether if they would think about farming in their business, if they would think about this idea of cultivating customers, you can move from just surviving into this idea of being able to thrive and grow and develop. Because our ancestors, when they started to farm, when they figured out this idea that they could produce food on a regular basis, on a predictable cycle and system, they didn't have to get up and follow the herds around anymore. And that meant that they could settle in one place. And that meant that they could form villages that grew into towns, that grew into cities, that grew into civilization. And now, even today, civilization is based on the fact that we don't have to go out and find our next meal. That's the ability to thrive. So what does that mean in business? So here's some of the analogies we think about when we think about sales and developing business, finding our next customers. Everybody can recognize this maybe? What is this? All right, so it's a pipeline. How many of you have heard this analogy before in business? Where's your pipeline? Really, only a few of us. Your sales pipeline. We've used that. It's probably been around for about 30, 40 years in common vernacular. Where are they at in the pipeline? And we know that, and we use that analogy because people said, you know, this doesn't happen immediately anymore. You've probably all seen, or many of you have seen, The Wolf of Wall Street. And you see him pick up the phone and he makes a big sale in one call. But the reality is that doesn't happen very often. I don't know how many of us would be able to say that that happens on a daily basis. Maybe every once in a while. But the reality is that it's a process. And so they came up with this analogy of a pipeline. How do we move people down the pipeline? But this is problematic because it's very narrow. So then they came out with the funnel. And so where is your sales or your marketing funnel? How do you catch all these people and be able to funnel them into your business? But here's the problem with these two analogies, the main beef that I have with them. I have never bought a piece of pipe or a funnel where I expected things to fall out of them. If I buy a funnel and I pour something into it, I want everything I pour in that funnel to come out the other end. And unfortunately, that just doesn't happen. What's the problem with the funnel? If people are falling out of it, and it's a false expectation. And so then we go and we hire marketing companies that we say are going to be able to bring us all these leads, and all of those leads are going to turn into customers, and it's going to be fantastic. But that never, ever happens. And so what I want you all to think about today are all of the things that are out there, all the things that you've been presented with, all the things that you've seen, all the things that you've done research with, to be able to grow your business. Think about all the things that are out there. You've got promotional products, you've got SEO, you've got your web design, you've got logo design, email marketing, social media marketing, you've got every other type of marketing, ad placement, and lead generation technique that you can possibly think of to drive leads into your business. But do all of those things cost money? All of those things cost money. So here's the problem. If all of those things cost money, how do you choose as a small business owner, where do you place these things? Where do they fit inside your business, inside that process of business development? Because how many of you have a website? All right. Most of us have a website. How many of you are using email marketing? Anybody paying for SEO services? Anybody still doing direct mail? All of these things are good things. All of these things can work in your business. But the question that a lot of small business owners ask me is, what do I do first? And how do I line these things up? Because if you're sending out direct mail, trying to drive them to a website, and your website is not very well developed, it's not going to function very well. And so I've seen this many, many times over the last 4 years working with small business owners. And eventually, I had mentors come back and say, just go back to what you know. If you could explain this in a way that you know, how would you do it? And many of you have already figured out by listening to me talk that I'm not originally from Miami. I grew up on a farm just north of here, not just north, about 6 hours north of here, just north of Gainesville. And so I went back and I thought about all those lessons that I learned up growing on the farm. And how do those apply back to business? And this is where the model comes in. And so I want you to think about this process. And I want you to think about if you were going to plant a garden, because we don't all have farms down here, but if you were just going to plant a garden with your kids in the backyard, how would you go about that? I want you to actually take a moment at your table. I'm only giving you about 1 minute, and I want you all to come up with a process that you all can agree upon. What is the basic, fundamental process that you would use to grow a garden? What are the steps in that process? Does that make sense? Can everybody do that at your table? Take 1 minute, go. Go ahead and stop. So let's see what you've come up with. And we'll still wait and see if we can get the projector back on. But what is the first step? If you're going to plant a garden, what's the first step? Pick the location. All right, what else?
Actually, before that, we have to think what are we going to...
All right, before that, you've got to think about what you're going to plant. All right, you've got to make a plan, and all these things are going to go into it. Every year, about December, January or so, on my family farm, we would start thinking about what we were going to plant. So were we going to be squash, tomatoes, beans that year? What were we going to plant? And then where are we going to plant it? Because different areas of the farm had different environmental conditions. Some were wetter than others, some drier, some sandier, some more Some had better nutrition in the soil, more fertile in the soil. So where are you going to plant it at? And then here's the key question. When do you want to harvest it? Not when do you want to plant it, but when do you want to harvest it? For example, we would grow watermelons. We knew that we had to plant watermelons back in February because if we didn't, those watermelons would not come into season before Memorial Day, which is when prices were at their peak. And if we waited until after Memorial Day, the rest of the watermelons up the southeast coast would come in and prices continued to drop. That was planning on when we wanted to harvest it. Think about this in your business. Instead of thinking about a growing season, though, think about campaigns. A lot of us are out there just every day, let me go see who I can meet, or we're using some type of marketing, but we're really not trying to farm with that. We're trying to go fishing, right? We're just putting something out there and hoping people call in or hoping people walk through the door. But think about it as a campaign. So if you're thinking about when do you want this item to close, does it need to happen around a season? Does something need to happen just before school comes back in? Does something need to happen before the holiday shopping season? How long will that take? And work backwards from there. If you can work backwards from there, you can start to develop the rest of the pieces. So beyond that, now we have a plan in place. We know what we're going to plant or know what we're going to sell. Who do we want to sell it to? Where are we going to sell it? And when do we want it to close? Now what's the next thing? Go back to the gardening analogy. What's the next piece? You've got to till the soil. We'll say you've got to prepare the fields. What do you do that makes your prospective customers more receptive to the message that you have to offer? Not just come up into their face, and I'm sure this doesn't happen here, but I'm sure you've been to other networking events where you walk into the networking event and all of a sudden there's that guy that before he even looks you in the eye has put a business card in your hand and expects you to want to call him for some reason. What do you do to build that credibility, to gain that visibility, to build trust with folks? This is branding. Out of that big list of things, all those things that you do just to get out in front of the market, think about placing them here. So if you're talking about web design, yes, your website can generate sales for you. Maybe it communicates that message. But before anything, Mark Sterniglia, what does your website have to do? Has to help convince people. It's part of the branding process. Mark, by the way, is a great website designer, does that a lot for legal firms. Helps them to establish that credibility as soon as people land on that homepage. It builds credibility. So now you've tilled the soil. You've made them more receptive to your message. So now in the gardening process, you prepared the soil, then what do you have to do? You have to plant the seeds. So planting the seeds, how do you do that in business development? All these other processes that are out there, all of the direct mail, all the social media, all of these other things. How do you plant the seed? How do you make that initiation of the opportunity? Do you put it in the right order? If you are trying to close business or try to talk about doing business before someone trusts you or trusts your company or trusts your brand, it is not going to be effective. It's just like casting seeds out on the ground where anyone may or may not take root. So are you doing the work ahead of time to then be able to plant that seed? And are you doing it effectively? What is your unique selling proposition? What is that unique value that you bring that people should do business with you? Can you communicate that very quickly? That's not just at networking events. That's on those pieces of direct mail that are going out, right? How many pieces of direct mail do you see that come? Because as a person in the industry, you're kind of a critic of it, right? You get the pieces coming in, you're like, oh, it's garbage. It's terrible. Oh, we should have done that a lot better, right? We could have done that a lot better. It happens all the time. People don't communicate what their value is, why people should call them, and don't ask them to do it. They don't give them that next step. So where is the marketing there? So think about this in terms of the process. We prepare the fields, and then we plant the seeds. But then what do you have to do in the garden? What's next? You've got to water, not only water, what else? Water, fertilize, and depending on what you're growing, it could be a very long process. This is the process of cultivation. Because a lot of us go around and we find those contacts and maybe they like us well enough, but then we fail at the follow-up. And we're not continuing to stay in front of those prospective customers. And you can do that in a lot of different ways. James Schulman over here runs a company with his wife, Kristen, and they do social media marketing and other things. They're my social media marketing company. That's why I invited him here today, because I know he's going to put out a lot of great things about this talk on social media. But that's one of the ways we stay in front of customers. That's one of the ways that we connect them. And so it sounds a lot like the rest of the branding and marketing that you're doing, but now it's very, very focused. Not for a general audience, but for people who have put their hand up and people who you know have at least an interest in doing business with you. How do you keep them alive? How do you keep that process going? This is the nurture process. And if you continue to do that, for some people longer than others, remember if you're growing wheatgrass in a tray, you can turn that around in about 2 weeks. If you're trying to grow mangoes in your backyard, that could take 3 to 5 years. But then it continues to go on and on and on. It's different business models. So nurture all the way to the end. So you get ready to go to the harvest. But before you do that, though, there's still one other step. Next step. Maybe not. What else do you have to do during that process? Between the time that you've planted and the time that there we go, the harvest, you've got to figure out how to manage those pests. So think about it in a garden. 3 big types of pests in a garden. You've got weeds, you've got disease, and then you have all those little critters trying to eat your stuff. So in business, it's very much the same way. The weeds are all those distractions that you have, all those other things that you've got going on that keep you from following up the way you should. How can you eliminate those? The disease, that's your screw-ups. Those things that you do that give people a bad impression of you, or those things that you have done that turn around in bad word-of-mouth marketing. Maybe somebody goes on Yelp. And so now there is, in addition to that whole list we saw at the front, there's this whole other industry coming up called reputation management. Just how do you manage your reputation online? How do you get better reviews on Yelp? And it's becoming a service that's added onto it. But if you're not out there, if it's not good for your business, it doesn't make sense to do. So we've got to manage the disease, and then finally your competition. Now I know it would be fun if we could just like grab a bottle of bug spray and spray our competition away. That may be nice, but it's not going to happen. So think about some other things. How can you exclude your competition from that process? How can you continue to strengthen that relationship with your prospective customer so they see the value that you add that no one else can? If you can do that, this relationship continues to grow, and eventually we get to the point that we all want to get to, which is the point where we harvest. How do you bring it home? Now, on the farm, there was a saying that my dad used to have he didn't have to say it very often, but sometimes I'd not want to get up that early in the morning, and he would come to the bedroom, and he would say, "Son, that field is not going to pick itself. We have to get out there, and we have to do it." And this is the other big mistake I see with a lot of small business owners. They believe just because they've spent the money on branding, just because they've spent the money on marketing, just because they've shown up at the networking events, that they are somehow now entitled to the business. But unfortunately, that rarely happens. You have got to get out there and make it close. You have to ask for the order. You have to have something in place to be able to say, is it now time to do business? You don't want to do it too early, because if you've ever bitten into a green tomato, you know that's not a very good experience. You want to let things get to that point where they're ready. But how do you tell that? Do you have systems and processes in place to be able to know, are your clients ready to do business? Is the timing right now? And then once you do have that timing in place, do you have a process? In your industry, is that a formal proposal? Do you have to do a presentation for some type of a board? What is it that's going to make that happen? Develop it down into a process and figure out the best way to bring it home and to close that business. Now, some of us might think that that is the end, right? You plant a garden and you want to be able to harvest, you get those tomatoes. But that's really not the end. Because what should you do next? All right, you've got to clean up a little bit, but before that even. If you've ever taken an apple, or I know I have some friends that grow heirloom tomatoes in their backyards, every time they harvest one of those tomatoes, they don't just cut it up and eat it and throw away the scraps. They're always saving the seeds. They're always looking to propagate. So in your business, what do you have in place? What systems are in place to be able to generate those repeat sales? Do you have a subscription model in your business? Or is there some process that you know you can upsell to the next service and to the next service and continue to have those processes in place? And some of us, we just have a transactional business. It's not going to be that type of model. And so then propagation comes in the form of referrals. You can still have a referral-based program, something to have your customers who are already pleased with your service bring them back to you. Again, this is not a new idea, but it has to fall into place. If you are not doing well in sales yourself, if you're not having the rest of these things lead up to it, having a referral program may not be the best thing, because the last thing you want is a customer to send somebody to you and you have no process to take that referral up to the point where you can provide them service. So this is that cycle. Brand, market, nurture, have some sales, and some way to generate repeats and referrals. It is a farming process. And if you think about it, how many of you know of a hunter-gatherer society anywhere remotely close to here? 7 billion people on the face of the earth, and a very, very small fraction still live like that. The reality is our species have become farming and agriculture-based. So when will our businesses start to do that? Now, there are a few other considerations here. This process that I just described, it can be applied to a particular sale. You can set up and say, I have one particular prospect, and I know I'm going to take them through this entire process. But you could also put that down for a large campaign, sending out to many prospects. If you're doing direct mail or EDDM, you're going to send it out to a large group of individuals, trying to get them all to that process in harvest. But it can also be the basis of your entire business. Don't just think about one campaign. Think about how these campaigns stack. And so when you're starting out, you may not be able to afford any of these services that people provide. You still have to get out there, and you're still hunting for the business. But if you understand how to manage your money, how to manage those profits, you then begin to reinvest those back into branding, back into marketing, back into the other processes that are going to make these things happen faster and at greater scale. This is how a hunter becomes a small farmer, becomes a big farmer, and eventually a big estate with land around everywhere. This is the same process for business growth. Find a small process, repeat it, grow it, and it becomes an upward and upward spiral. Next thing, think about sustainability though. And there's some key things with sustainability. Things adapt over time. This is another reason I like this farming model versus a pipeline or a funnel. Because pipelines and funnels are pretty static. All they can do is just kind of like rust and deteriorate. But a farm is a very dynamic system. And the things that change out in the market are also very dynamic. I mean, how many of you have seen and had to change your marketing techniques in the last 5 years, much less 15 years? All right, several of us. So if you're not changing and adapting over time, you're going to be left behind. But then the next thing, what works in the short term could kill you in the long term. So there are several ways that I can go out and kill weeds. If there are weeds in the garden, you can spray a lot of different things on them to kill them. Take diesel or gas, for example. You could go salt the earth, and it'll kill the weeds. It'll get the job done. But then it has killed the whole productivity of that spot of ground. Same thing can happen in marketing, and we see this a lot. People come in and they use black hat marketing techniques, or they use really hard sales techniques to be able to come in and generate business very quickly. And they will generate business very quickly in the short term. But then we all know what happens in that story. They develop a bad reputation, and before long, no one is doing business with them anymore. So think about the techniques that you're using. Just because somebody tries to sell you something and says they can generate immediate results, think about long term and what that's going to do for your brand. And then lastly, it's about profit. A lot of the services that we use to generate business for our companies, they are expensive and they can generate great results. But remember, the goal of your business is not the top line revenue. So just because something can send you tens or hundreds or thousands of potential customers, and you may even be able to close them, if the costs of doing that rise in proportion, you're not really that much better off. In fact, you may be worse off. Because even though it's proportional in the amount of expense monetarily, the amount of expense in your energy and your time is also going to increase. And how much is that worth? And so I thank you for your time and your attention being here today and for the ability to come and share this idea, share a little bit of a model with you. Hopefully it's useful for you.